A U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer sailed through waters near the Paracel Islands in the South China Sea, challenging China's claim to the area, the Navy said Wednesday. Later on, the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet said in a press release that on Thursday it had sent the USS Montgomery and transport ship USNS Cesar Chavez near the West Capella, the oil exploration ship which is operating within Malaysian waters. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy was targeting China with live-fire missile tests in the Philippine Sea last week, sending a message that it was up to the challenge of the PLA's new advanced systems, military analysts said. In the drill in waters east of the Philippines on Thursday, the guided missile destroyer USS Barry launched a medium-range Standard Missile-2, the U.S. 7th Fleet said on its Facebook page. It was accompanied by the guided missile cruiser USS Shiloh, which also launched an SM-2 during the drill. Later on, 4 B-1B bombers and about 200 airmen from Texas arrived in Guam on Friday to conduct training and operations with allies and partners, the Air Force said. Later on, the Global Times editor he tweeted about the post on Friday. I said on Chinese social media that China needs to expand the number of its nuclear warheads to over 1,000 to strengthen nuclear deterrent, given U.S. rising strategic ambitions and impulses targeting China, who wrote. It received over 60,000 likes. China pledges no first use and it loves peace. Here are all the details. A U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer sailed through waters near the Paracel Islands in the South China Sea, challenging China's claim to the area, the Navy said Wednesday. The USS Barry undertook the so-called Freedom of Navigation operation on Tuesday, a week after Beijing upped its claims to the region by designating an official administrative district for the islands. The U.S. sought to assert the rights, freedoms and lawful uses of the sea recognized in international law, the Navy said in a statement. Unlawful and sweeping maritime claims in the South China Sea pose an unprecedented threat to the freedom of the seas, including the freedoms of navigation and overflight and the right of innocent passage of all ships, it said. The move came amid a rise in U.S.-China tensions over the novel coronavirus epidemic, in which Washington has accused Beijing of hiding and downplaying the initial outbreak in December and January in the Chinese city of Wuhan. The United States rejects China's territorial claim to much of the South China Sea, including the Paracels, also claimed by Vietnam and Taiwan. The region is believed to have valuable oil and gas deposits. In a statement on the People's Liberation Army website, the Chinese military said it had mobilized sea and air assets to track and warn the U.S. vessel away from Chinese territorial waters. The PLA accused the United States of provocative acts that seriously violated international law and China's sovereignty and security interests. The U.S. action was also incompatible with the current joint efforts of international community to fight against the COVID-19, it said. Last week China sought to further advance its territorial claims when it announced that the Paracel and nearby Spratly Islands, the Macclesfield Bank and their surrounding waters would be administered under 2 new districts of Sancha City, which China created on nearby Woody Island in 2012. It also announced official Chinese names for 80 islands and other geographical features in the South China Sea, including reefs, seamounts, shoals and ridges, 55 of them submerged in water. Meanwhile, Hu Zhaijun, the editor-in-chief of an English daily tabloid published by the ruling Chinese Communist Party, urged his nation to expand its nuclear arsenal in response to bullying from the U.S. in a new editorial. In the article published by the Global Times on Saturday, Hu argued that China needed to build up its stockpile of nuclear weapons as a deterrent, as U.S. officials have been increasingly critical of the Chinese government amid the coronavirus pandemic. The editor argued that this would safeguard national security. Continuing, the editor argued that the U.S. was currently more likely to exert all its power at its disposal to suppress and intimidate China. He warned that China needs to possess the real power to prevent the U.S. politicians from gambling with its nuclear armament and harming China. The Global Times editor previously posted his suggestion to the Chinese social media platform Weibo. He tweeted about the post on Friday. I said on Chinese social media that China needs to expand the number of its nuclear warheads to over 1,000 to strengthen nuclear deterrent, given U.S. rising strategic ambitions and impulses targeting China, Hu wrote. It received over 60K likes. China pledges no first use and it loves peace. Meanwhile, the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet called on China to end its bullying behavior in the South China Sea as the U.S. sent a warship near the spot where a Malaysian contracted oil exploration ship is operating and close to a recently deployed Chinese survey vessel. The U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet said in a press release that on Thursday it had sent the USS Montgomery and transport ship USNS Cesar Chavez near the West Capella, the oil exploration ship which is operating within Malaysian waters. The Chinese survey ship Haiyang DG-8, escorted by China Coast Guard (CCG) ships and maritime militia, has been conducting a survey nearby since April 15. That is widely viewed as an attempt to intimidate Malaysia out of exploiting resources in waters that China also claims. The USS Montgomery is the second American littoral combat ship to sail in that area of the South China Sea within 2 weeks, after the USS Gabrielle Giffords patrolled there on April 26. The Chinese Communist Party must end its pattern of bullying Southeast Asians out of offshore oil, gas, and fisheries. Millions of people in the region depend on those resources for their livelihood, ADM. John Aquilino, commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, said in a press release. Tensions have been rising in the resource-rich South China Sea, which China largely claims for itself, notwithstanding conflicting territorial claims involving 5 other governments. Assertive behavior at sea and recent Chinese declarations of administrative authority over the contested area have drawn protests from both neighboring countries and the U.S. government. China frequently sends research vessels, Coast Guard ships, and paramilitary forces to assert its claims. The CCG is much bigger and better armed than most navies in the region, including that of Malaysia. But experts said that by sending ostensibly civilian law enforcement ships, China increases pressure on its rivals without allowing territorial disputes to spiral into war. James R. Holmes, a professor of maritime strategy at the U.S. Naval War College, said the recent deployments of U.S. littoral combat ships hint at a new role for these advanced but smaller vessels, which may be better suited to countering gray zone tactics employed by China. The U.S. Navy rotates its 4 littoral combat ships in and out of Singapore's Changi Naval Base. Meanwhile, 4 B-1B bombers and about 200 airmen from Texas arrived in Guam on Friday to conduct training and operations with allies and partners, the Air Force said. The Lancers and airmen flew in from the 9th Bomb Squadron, 7th Bomb Wing, at Dyess Air Force Base, Texas, the service said in a statement Friday. They were deployed to support Pacific Air Forces in training allies and partners and to reinforce the rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific region through strategic deterrence missions, the statement said. The Air Force did not disclose the length of the deployment. 3 of the bombers flew directly to Andersen Air Force Base on Guam, while the 4th flew east of Japan to train with the U.S. Navy before joining the others, the statement said. Deployments like this allow our airmen to enhance the readiness and training necessary to respond to any potential crisis or challenge across the globe, Wing Commander Colonel Ed. Sumangal said in the statement. It also provides a valuable opportunity to better integrate with our allies and partners through joint and combined operations and exercises. 2 weeks ago, the Air Force abruptly ended its longtime practice of rotating bombers through Andersen for 6-month intervals, opting instead for a less predictable means of deploying the aircraft throughout the globe. The Air Force had used those Guam-based bomber missions to patrol over the East and South China Seas as a means of projecting U.S. air power and resolve to North Korea, China and Russia. B-1s were last deployed to the Indo-Pacific region in 2017, the Air Force said. The B-1 is valued for its capability to carry a larger conventional payload of both guided and unguided weapons than the B-52. The B-1 is able to carry a larger payload of joint air-to-surface standoff missiles and a larger payload of 2,000-pound class joint direct attack munitions, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Welton, Pacific Air Force's Chief of Operations Force Management, said in the statement. Additionally, the B-1 is able to carry the anti-ship cruise missile, giving it an advanced standoff, counter-ship capability. It also has an advanced self-protection suite and is able to transit at supersonic speeds to enhance offensive and defensive capabilities. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy was targeting China with live-fire missile tests in the Philippine Sea last week, sending a message that it was up to the challenge of the PLA's new advanced systems, military analysts said. In the drill in waters east of the Philippines on Thursday, the guided missile destroyer USS Barry launched a medium-range Standard Missile-2, the U.S. 7th Fleet said on its Facebook page. It was accompanied by the guided missile cruiser USS Shiloh, which also launched an SM-2 during the drill. Beijing-based military specialist Zhou Chenming said these kinds of drill were not common and could be seen as a warning to the People's Liberation Army. The U.S. Navy is worried about Chinese missiles, which China could use as a trump card in a military conflict between the two parties in the region. The 7th Fleet wants to warn Beijing that it can intercept missiles from China, Zhou said. Li Jia, another Beijing-based military analyst, agreed that the launches were a message to China, and to a lesser extent, Russia. The U.S. Navy wants to tell China that they can counter the PLA's advanced missiles, Li said. The PLA has developed two kinds of missiles that could pose big threats to the U.S. military, the Carrier Killer DF-21D and the anti-ship DF-26, which has a 4,000 km (2,500-mile) range and puts the U.S. naval base in Guam within reach. Either one of the missiles might have been put through its paces in June when the PLA rocket force staged missile tests in the disputed South China Sea, according to the Pentagon. The USS Barry was retrofitted with the latest Aegis combat system 2 years ago, improving its ability to defend bases such as Guam and U.S. warships from the two kinds of Chinese missiles. Further U.S. upgrades and tests can be expected, as the PLA tries to narrow the hardware, software and training gap with the American military, according to Colin Ko Sui Lin, a research fellow with the Institute of Defense and Strategic Studies Maritime Security Program in Singapore. Given the shift in defense focus to the Indo-Pacific and with the PLA threat in mind, I wouldn't be surprised if the U.S. Navy conducted more such live-fire exercises to validate the fleet's capabilities against the evolving PLA missile strength, Ko said, adding that the Philippine Sea would be a significant battlefield in any future China-U.S. armed conflict. The missile launches come as the U.S. strengthens military links with Vietnam, the Philippines and other regional allies as part of its Indo-Pacific strategy to curb China's power in the South China Sea. The 7th Fleet said the Barry's live-fire operation was in support of security and stability in the Indo-Pacific. Hong Kong-based military commentator Song Jongping said the drill in the Philippine Sea was meant to strengthen the U.S. military presence in the region, amid fears that the U.S. could be forced out by the PLA. The Philippine Sea is also the critical maritime artery for PLA vessels when they sail to the Western Pacific and Indian Oceans, Song said. The U.S. Navy needs to further enhance its military presence in the region, signaling that political trust between the two countries is falling.
Don't forget to like our video and subscribe for our channel.